Hi, this is Tom Soane, and landlords do not advertise anywhere or say anywhere that you do not accept housing benefit or DSS or anything similar to that. Please don't do it. If you've got a listing out there now for a property that you have available to let, then you need to get on that listing and remove that wording from your advertisement. And I'm going to give you a way. Look, if you, in your own mind, if you just don't tolerate or accept any housing benefit or DSS or any benefits of any kind from tenants, then there is a way that you can stick to that criteria. Whether it's right or wrong is a total different discussion, but there is a way that you can stick to that, but you must not, please don't mention it anywhere, because now they're out to get you. So first of all, look, the reason this is happening is all about discrimination. And again, look, this isn't a topic to discuss whether I agree with it or disagree with it. I agree with parts of it and disagree with others. I can see the principle behind it and the I guess the idea behind it. But it's also not really for you to decide whether it's discriminatory or not. This is the rule now. So just to recap, you're not allowed to advertise anywhere that you do not accept DSS. Let's just call it DSS for the sake of this conversation. Now, yeah, so it all comes back to the discrimination against any sort of tenant or any type of tenant or any tenant that receives benefits. And I'm going to give you a story of how all this kind of became quite big and inflamed. There was a single mum who was trying to find a property for her and her son to move into, but she was ringing around all the letting agents, and pretty much all of them were just saying, sorry, we don't accept DSS. And when she was questioning that and saying, well, look, I'm on DSS because I've had a child, I'm a single mum, I used to work, but now I can't because I've got a child to care for. The letting agents were just saying, sorry, it's company policy. No, the landlord doesn't accept it. She was scrolling through Rightmove listings. All of the properties that were suitable for her said no DSS, no housing benefit, do not apply. If I put myself in that single mum's shoes, then I feel quite sorry for her. Can you imagine that? You're trying to provide a home for you and your son. Of course, you know, I've got children, and anybody watching this who has children, you would feel pretty crappy if you weren't able to provide a home for your children. I'd be really angry about that, and I would do everything I can to provide a home for my child. But if there were outside circumstances or outside criteria that were preventing me from doing that, then I think I would start to feel quite frustrated, and then I'd probably start to feel quite sad for my child. I don't think that's a nice feeling. So anyway, put yourself in her shoes. She's trying to get a property. Her current landlord was selling the property, so she had to move out. And look, there are processes that you can follow in that instance for that tenant, but you know, that's a different story. In this instance, she had to move out, couldn't find a property because no one would accept her. Even though on the face of it, she could have been the loveliest tenant, she could have been a real good tenant. And in fact, her previous tenancy was for 9 years, where she never caused any hassle. She paid her rent every month and had no issues whatsoever. So she found it quite difficult, and it ended up going to court, and the judge ruled in favour of that it was basically discrimination. So now, because that court case happened and that ruling happened, we as letting agents and you as landlords and me as a landlord cannot advertise that we do not accept DSS, even if we do not accept DSS. So the question has to be, how can you, look, I don't want to say get around it, and I really don't want to jump on the side of landlords that don't accept DSS or landlords that do accept DSS, because for me, there are good tenants and there are bad tenants, and that's not categorized by DSS. So I think bad tenants can be employed and still be bad tenants. I think bad tenants can be unemployed and still be bad tenants. There are good tenants on DSS and bad tenants on DSS. There are good tenants who have got awesome references and histories, and there are bad tenants that have got awesome references and histories. Circumstances change. So what is a bad tenant? For me, a bad tenant is someone who doesn't pay the rent and damages the property. That's a bad tenant. And that person can come from all walks of life. So I do agree with the discrimination against DSS tenants. However, if you are a regular human being and you've had a bad experience with a number of DSS tenants, or you've heard lots of experiences of others with bad for DSS tenants, then that's going to put you off a bit. So let me give you a bit of an idea of how you can solve that problem and still make sure you get a good tenant regardless of DSS or not. Because believe it or not, DSS is not a bad thing if you do the right work up front, if you put the right effort in and the right due diligence and the right analysis up front. So how do you do that? Number one, take that listing, remove that wording from the listing. No DSS, take that away. Now what you can do is add the requirement for that property. And I'll give you an example. And actually, I'm just going to make this number up. I mean, I'm not calculating this, so don't take this as the golden number. But if you've got a property that's £800 per month, then you can put in the listing, for an example, that this property requires an income of £25,000 or more, for an example. And you could also include in that listing, a guarantor may be required in certain instances. So there you go. You're not discriminating against anybody. You're just stating what is required. Now, DSS or housing benefit or whatever, if somebody applies, or if a DSS tenant applies for that property, you should process them through as normal. You shouldn't discriminate. Absolutely not. And then if that tenant passes the income criteria, the guarantor criteria, then they may move into the property if you approve them. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, do check their history. The first thing you need to do is check their history, check their referencing, check their previous landlord reference or letting agent reference, because that will tell you how they conduct themselves. That will tell you whether they're a good paying tenant or not. And also from there, meet them, interview them, talk to them, ask them questions about them as a person, what they do, what their hobbies are, what their interests are, what they how they treat their property, what plans they have, and so on and so on and so on. Look, just talk to them, because I bet you're a good judge of character. We're all human beings, and I bet you can look at a tenant and after a very short amount of time decide whether they are suitable for your property and for you to look after in your investment property. Are they a suitable person for you to, I guess, manage for the foreseeable future? Assuming they're going to be there for the next 7 or 8 years, then are they worthy of that in your opinion? Because it is still your approval that's required. So now you're not discriminating against a tenant for DSS or their circumstances. If you just don't like someone, you don't have to move them into your property. There are no court cases where a judge has said, well, you can't reject them because you don't like them. Well, you can, absolutely. This is your right as a property owner, as a landlord. Now, whether that's right or wrong is a different discussion. I'm not condoning that you don't let someone move in because you don't like them. I'm not condoning accepting or not accepting DSS tenants. I'm kind of sitting on the fence with that. I'm just trying to give you some options that keep you compliant and also keep it fair and non-discriminatory. So try that. Just make sure you remove that listing. There is another part to all of this. If when tenants contact you and inquire about your property, do not say that you don't accept DSS. Don't say it. Please, please, please don't say it. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, it is discriminatory, and I think I'm saying that word right. And if you do say it to the wrong person and you get reported, there could be some trouble for you. First of all, don't say it, don't advertise it, don't write it, don't email it, don't text it, don't do anything that would imply anywhere that you don't accept housing benefit or DSS. So promise me you won't do that. So I think there could be quite serious fines for this. I'm estimating that it could be anywhere up to about £2,000 or £3,000. You don't need that hassle, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, because actually you might not need to worry about it, because there are good tenants that are on DSS. Do you know what? In my letting agent, we've got hundreds of properties that we manage, and there is a percentage of those properties that are DSS tenants, and they're good as gold. And do you know what? Whenever we've experienced problems with tenants, and unfortunately, you know, despite what any other letting agent will tell you, all letting agents do have issues with tenants at some time or another. That's the same with any landlord. Everyone will have had some sort of issue at some point in history. That's unavoidable. That's lettings, that's property, that's landlording, that's the risk. There are good tenants that are on DSS. Just check out their circumstances, check out their referencing, check out their history. And I'll give you another little example. There's a very, very capable career woman that had been in a very high level career for a number of years. This lady had a child, and unfortunately it didn't work out with her partner. So they ended that relationship, and she needed to find a place on her own with her child. So she had to stop her career, pause her career for a couple of years whilst she raised her child. I think she was doing it for 1 year while she raised her child. Now, bear in mind, this lady was used to earning very, very good money in a very, very high up career. She was a very capable woman, very intelligent, very professional, and her having a child unfortunately meant she had to stop that career for around a year or whatever it might have been. So she went to try and find properties, and everywhere was saying to her, sorry, we don't accept DSS. Because, oh, sorry, by the way, she was then accepting DSS support because she could no longer work. No, we don't accept DSS. No, we don't do that. No, we don't do this. It's our company criteria. Sorry, we don't like tenants who receive support from the government. So she couldn't find a place. And, you know, even though she was saying, look, I'm only taking a year out so that I can raise my child, and then the child will go to nursery and so on and so on. Nope, couldn't get any help. She's a really good tenant. She's now one of my tenants, and she's a really good tenant. She looks after the property. She's really professional and nice and polite and pleasant and easy to work with, and she doesn't damage the property. She pays the rent every month without fail, and I think I've got a really good tenant there. So look, just take that for yourself. She is an example of a good tenant that just receives support from the government. We're all entitled to it depending on our circumstances, so don't discriminate against anyone who does receive that kind of help. But also it's law. So anyway, look, just take that and accept that, and if you don't accept DSS as a rule, there are still ways that you could stick to that rule. I think it's an incorrect rule to have. I think you should judge every tenant based on their own criteria, and DSS income is one of those criteria. Income is income. You know, you're just as likely to lose your DSS income as you are losing your job. I mean, I don't know the stats behind that, but you know, DSS is an income just in the same way as your job is an income. So don't discriminate, and that will see you right. I'm trying to come up with a sign-off. Basically, I'm trying to come up with a sign-off for each of my podcast episodes. It's not important. It doesn't add any value really, but I really want to have a sign-off. And my podcast is called The Anonymous Landlord. And at the end of each podcast, I want to be able to say a little quote or a little line that kind of symbolizes everything. But all I can come up with is actually too long, too big a line or tagline. So I'd be interested to know your thoughts about a sign-off, tagline, quote, whatever that I could say at the end of each podcast about The Anonymous Landlord. So yeah, let me know. Send me an email, tom@pinkstreet.co.uk. But in the meantime, do not discriminate. My name's Tom Soane, and this is The Anonymous Landlord.